You are standing in the middle of a crowded subway car, shoulder to shoulder with dozens of people, yet you feel completely invisible. Later, you lie on your bed and scroll through thousands of followers, watching endless reels of other people's vibrant lives while sitting alone in a dark room. This is the defining, heartbreaking paradox of our time. We are the most technologically connected generation in human history, yet we are collectively starving for intimacy. It is a quiet agony, but it is louder and far more destructive than we want to admit. This starvation is not just a fleeting emotional slump. It is a lethal, systemic crisis. The United States Surgeon General recently released an advisory declaring a national loneliness epidemic, putting hard data behind our silent suffering. The report revealed that the physical impact of prolonged social isolation is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We are literally dying of loneliness, our bodies collapsing under the weight of our own hyperindependence. No new app, virtual reality headset, or social network update is going to save us from this trajectory. To fix this, we need to look backward, 2,000 years backward, to a radical, subversive movement that changed the very fabric of human connection forever. But first, we have to understand exactly how we got here. It begins with how we have fundamentally redefined the concept of friendship in the modern world. Relationships today have become deeply transactional, modeled almost entirely after our relentless consumer habits. We treat people like digital subscriptions. We keep them around only as long as they offer maximum entertainment with minimum inconvenience. The moment a friend requires too much emotional bandwidth or disrupts our meticulously planned schedules, we quietly cancel them and move on. We have optimized our modern lives for absolute comfort, speed, and efficiency. But true, life-giving friendship is inherently inefficient and profoundly uncomfortable. It requires time, sacrifice, and a willingness to step into someone else's chaos. Because we no longer want the mess, we settle for the superficial, trading deep roots for shallow interactions. This transactional culture is dangerously amplified by the digital age and the creation of the curated self, an exhausting performance where we must constantly broadcast our victories. We meticulously filter out the mundane, the broken, and the ugly parts of our existence to present a flawless aesthetic to the world. But here is the tragic, inescapable irony of the human condition. You cannot be truly loved if you're not truly known. By hiding our flaws behind a digital mask, we actively prevent the exact vulnerability required for genuine, soul-deep connection. We end up with a vast network of acquaintances who love a carefully crafted avatar of us. This leaves our actual, messy, authentic selves completely unseen, uncelebrated, and unloved. The toll of this manufactured isolation is devastating, ravaging both our physical bodies and our minds. Chronic loneliness triggers a perpetual state of fight or flight in our nervous systems, elevating cortisol levels and breaking down our immune responses. This leads to skyrocketing rates of severe anxiety, clinical depression, and cardiovascular disease across all age demographics. Our bodies are physically rejecting the isolated, walled-off environments we have built for ourselves. We are functioning like severed organs separated from a living body, slowly failing because we were never designed to survive on our own. This grim biological reality points to a much deeper, profound spiritual truth that we have tragically ignored. According to ancient Christian theology, human beings are uniquely made in the imago Dei asterisk, the image of God. But this God is not a solitary, isolated figure brooding alone in the dark expanse of the cosmos. The historical Christian understanding of God is Trinitarian: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit existing in a perfect, eternal community of love, deference, and mutual surrender. If we are made in the image of a profoundly relational Creator, then we are quite literally hardwired down to our DNA for deep, self-giving community. Isolation isn't just a psychological hurdle or a modern inconvenience. It is a violent violation of our fundamental design. We feel an aching, hollow void when we are alone because our souls are echoing the community of the Trinity. We are crying out for the deep, sacrificial communion we were originally created to experience. To understand what we have lost, we have to look at the world that birthed the early Christian church. The first-century Roman Empire was a brutal, highly stratified, and deeply unforgiving society. It was a world of strict hierarchies, built on absolute power, relentless exploitation, and the rigid, uncrossable separation of social classes. Empathy was widely considered a weakness, and the idea of sacrificing your own comfort for someone outside your immediate family or social rank was utterly absurd. Into this cold, concrete world stepped a small, marginalized group of early believers who began treating one another in a way that absolutely shocked the ancient pagan world. They didn't just share a weekly meeting or a philosophical belief system. They shared their very lives, their homes, and their resources. Imagine the stark visual contrast between their world and ours. Today, we walk past thousands of strangers in towering, cold, glass and steel cities, our eyes glued to glowing screens, entirely insulated from the suffering of our neighbors. But in the shadows of the Roman Empire, a subversive community was forming that tore down the walls of isolation. They cared for the sick when others fled, they adopted the discarded, and they forged bonds so thick they considered themselves actual family. These early believers possessed a secret to human flourishing that our modern, hyper-individualized society has completely forgotten. It is time to pause and ruthlessly audit your own life. Look closely at your social circles, your group chats, and the thousands of followers on your screen. If everything in your life collapsed tonight, do you have someone you could call at 2 a.m. in a crisis who would actually show up? If the answer is no, you are not alone, but you cannot afford to stay here. We have to relearn the lost art of true, sacrificial connection before this epidemic consumes us entirely. Subscribe for Part 2, where we will uncover the radical blueprint the early church used to solve this exact problem. We will explore how their ancient model of community can completely transform your modern life today. If the thought of making that 2 a.m. phone call fills you with dread, you are experiencing the exact symptom of a society that has forgotten how to live together. We have substituted deep connection for mere proximity, living stacked on top of one another in sprawling apartment buildings while remaining total strangers. The ancient world had a word for the antidote to this modern sickness, a Greek term that completely redefined human relationships: koinonia. Often translated as communion or fellowship, koinonia meant something far more visceral than a polite handshake or a casual conversation over coffee. It translates literally to joint participation, a radical sharing of life where your survival, joy, and sorrow become inextricably linked to mine. To see *koinonia in action, we must look at the historical account of the early Christian church found in the book of Acts, specifically chapter 2. The text describes a community that did not just gather for an hour of religious programming on a Sunday morning before retreating to private, isolated lives. Instead, they devoted themselves to teaching, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer in a rhythm that consumed their entire existence. The author notes that all the believers were together and had everything in common, selling their property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. This was not a forced economic system or a begrudging tax. It was a spontaneous, overwhelming outpouring of generosity born from a profound sense of shared identity. Contrast this ancient, daily rhythm with our modern concept of friendship, which is almost exclusively event-based and highly compartmentalized. Today, we schedule our relationships weeks in advance, pencil friends into our digital calendars for a 2-hour dinner, and then retreat to our separate fortresses. We view socializing as an activity to be consumed rather than a communal fabric to be woven into our everyday lives. The early church did not schedule community. They simply lived it out in the open, sharing their homes, their meals, and their resources on a daily basis. They understood that true intimacy is not built in grand, carefully curated moments, but in the unglamorous, consistent sharing of ordinary life. What makes this Acts 2 community even more staggering is the historical and cultural backdrop against which it was forged. The Roman Empire was a world strictly defined by unyielding borders between masters and slaves, the wealthy elite and the destitute poor, Jews and Gentiles. These groups did not mix socially, they did not eat together, and they certainly did not view one another as equals in any capacity. Yet, when you walked into an early Christian gathering, you would witness a scene that bordered on societal treason. At the center of the room sat the communion table, a great equalizer where the suffocating hierarchies of the empire were entirely dismantled. Picture a wealthy Roman official kneeling beside a day laborer, or a servant passing the bread and wine to their earthly master. Imagine them looking at one another, stripping away their societal titles, and using the word brother or sister with absolute sincerity. This radical flattening of the social structure was not merely a philosophical ideal. It was a lived, breathing reality that shocked the surrounding pagan culture. Koinonia demanded that the ground at the foot of the cross be completely level, forcing people who had absolutely nothing in common into deep, familial bonds. They did not choose one another based on shared hobbies. They were bound together by a shared spiritual reality that superseded all earthly divisions. Today, our modern individualism has subtly reconstructed these ancient walls, trapping us within comfortable, highly homogenized echo chambers. We tend to only befriend people who look like us, vote like us, earn what we earn, and consume the exact same media. This self-segregation creates an illusion of community, but it is actually just a giant mirror reflecting our own preferences back to us. When we only associate with our exact demographic, our empathy atrophies, and our understanding of the human experience shrinks to the size of our own worldview. To reclaim the power of the early church, we must be willing to cross the invisible socioeconomic and cultural lines that heavily divide our modern cities. The primary battleground for this radical inclusion was not a public square or a grand cathedral, but the humble, cluttered dining table. In the ancient Near East, sharing a meal was a profoundly intimate act, a physical declaration of peace, acceptance, and mutual trust. The early Christians did not just meet in massive public temple courts. They broke bread in their private homes with glad and sincere hearts. There is a distinct, irreplaceable type of intimacy that is only forged when you invite someone into your personal space. You cannot replicate this depth of connection in the sterile, transient environments of modern commercial spaces. Restaurants and coffee shops are neutral territories, controlled environments where we can easily maintain our polished facades and escape when we feel uncomfortable. But when you invite someone into your home, you are inviting them into your actual reality. The lingering smell of garlic, the mismatched plates, the scuff marks on the floor. It is a profound act of vulnerability that says, I am taking down the velvet rope. You are welcome in my actual, uncurated life. This theology of hospitality transforms the simple act of eating from a basic biological necessity into a sacred ritual of human connection. Around the table, defenses naturally lower, steady eye contact is made, and the slow, deliberate work of knowing and being known finally takes place. Imagine the profound healing that could occur if we reclaimed our dining tables from the tyranny of solitary, screen-lit dinners. Picture a warm, inviting room filled with a beautifully diverse group of people, colleagues, neighbors, and strangers, passing heavy bowls of food. Envision them laughing loudly, spilling drinks, and sharing their genuine struggles without fear of judgment or immediate rejection. This is the vivid, beating heart of Koinonia, offering a stark, vibrant contrast to the sterile, isolated existence the modern world pushes us toward. The shared table is where strangers become friends, and where friends are forged into an unbreakable family unit. It is the most accessible, yet most revolutionary weapon we possess against the crushing weight of the modern loneliness epidemic. The beauty of this ancient blueprint is that it does not require a massive budget, a pristine home, or a theology degree to implement. It only requires the courage to unlock your front door and the humility to share your beautifully ordinary life. This week, I challenge you to look at the periphery of your social circle and identify someone who exists entirely outside your normal demographic. It could be a coworker from a different generation, a neighbor you only ever wave to, or someone at your local church who always sits alone. Invite them over for a simple, non-fancy meal, spaghetti, tacos, or even just a pot of coffee, and take the first radical step in breaking the cycle of isolation. Do not wait for your house to be perfectly clean or your life to be perfectly organized. True community starts the moment you decide to let people into the mess. But let us be completely honest about what that mess actually entails. True community is not just an aesthetic dinner party bathed in warm, cinematic lighting. It is not a carefully curated social media reel of friends clinking glasses and laughing effortlessly into the night. Authentic connection is incredibly inconvenient, frequently exhausting, and sometimes deeply painful. If we are going to build the kind of profound, life-altering bonds the early church possessed, we must embrace the agonizing reality of sacrificial friendship. This requires a radical departure from the modern mindset that views relationships as mutually beneficial networking. The Apostle Paul famously commanded the early believers to carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. In the original language, the word for burden implies a crushing, unbearable weight, a boulder entirely too massive for one human spine to support. To carry, it means stepping directly under the crushing weight of someone else's crisis, risking your own comfort and stability in the process. It asks a terrifying, deeply uncomfortable question. What are you willing to bleed for your friends today? Bleeding for a friend in the 21st century rarely involves physical martyrdom, but it demands a fierce sacrifice of our most guarded resources. It means surrendering your precious time, your financial security, and your limited emotional bandwidth when it is wildly inconvenient. Consider the story of a young professional whose closest friend suddenly lost his job and faced imminent eviction. Instead of offering hollow platitudes or sending a sympathetic text, this friend quietly drained his own savings account to cover 3 months of rent. He did not post about it online or demand endless gratitude. He simply saw a crushing weight and stepped underneath it. Sacrificial friendship is sitting in a sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital room for 3 days straight because your friend's world has just shattered. It is answering the phone at 3 in the morning, putting your own exhaustion aside to talk someone back from the ledge of a panic attack. These acts of profound burden-bearing are entirely antithetical to our hyper-individualized culture that preaches self-care and boundary setting above all else. But you cannot build a covenantal relationship while keeping your hands perfectly clean and your schedule perfectly intact. True love is forged in the trenches of human suffering, where the cost is extraordinarily high, but the connection is unbreakable. Yet, bearing someone else's burden is only half the equation of sacrificial friendship. The other, arguably more terrifying half, is allowing someone else to carry yours. The writer James laid down a staggering mandate for the early church, instructing them to confess their sins to each other so that they may be healed. This is the absolute crucible of vulnerability, stripping away the polished armor we wear to survive in the modern world. It marks the terrifying transition from trying to impress people with our strengths to connecting with them through our shared brokenness. We are utterly terrified of being fully known because we falsely believe that if people see our darkest flaws, they will abandon us. We hide our crushing anxieties, our secret addictions, and our quiet failures behind a facade of relentless competence. But impressing people only creates an unbridgeable distance. It builds an audience, not a community. When you refuse to confess your struggles, you deny your friends the sacred opportunity to love the real, unvarnished version of you. Healing does not happen in the shadows of our isolated perfectionism. It happens when we drag our darkest secrets into the light of a trusted friendship. Imagine looking across a table and saying the words, "I am failing, I am terrified, and I need help," without a single ounce of self-preservation. That level of raw, unfiltered confession shatters the superficial dynamics of a transactional relationship. It signals to the other person that they are safe to drop their own heavy armor and breathe freely in your presence. This mutual unmasking is the very bedrock of a covenantal friendship, a bond that is cemented not by shared successes, but by shared grace. However, when you invite two flawed, broken humans into this level of intimate proximity, a collision is entirely inevitable. In our modern consumer culture, the moment a relationship experiences friction, disappointment, or conflict, our immediate instinct is to eject. We have normalized the toxic practice of ghosting or canceling friends at the very first sign of relational discomfort. We treat people like defective products, returning them to the shelf and searching for a newer, easier replacement that requires less work. But a friendship that has never weathered a storm is nothing more than an untested acquaintance. You do not possess true, resilient community until you have survived your first major, agonizing conflict together. The early church was not a utopian society of flawless saints who never argued or hurt one another. They were a messy, volatile group of deeply flawed individuals who clashed constantly over theology, cultural differences, and personal offenses. The apostles Paul and Peter, two central pillars of the Christian faith, had a massive, public confrontation that threatened to fracture their relationship completely. Yet they did not cancel one another, split into rival factions, or retreat to comfortable, isolated echo chambers. They leaned directly into the fire of the conflict, doing the grueling, agonizing work of repentance, relentless forgiveness, and reconciliation. They understood that the covenant of friendship is not a naive promise that we will never hurt one another. It is a stubborn, defiant commitment to stay in the room and work it out long after the hurt has occurred. When a friend betrays your trust, speaks harshly, or fundamentally misunderstands you, the easy path is to walk away and build a new wall. The sacrificial path is to look them in the eye, name the wound, and choose the excruciatingly hard work of forgiveness. This radical commitment to unity is what transforms a fragile, transactional connection into an unbreakable, lifelong covenant. It teaches us that true love is not the absence of conflict, but the ultimate triumph over it through enduring grace. When you refuse to walk away, you prove to the other person that their inherent value to you is significantly greater than their mistakes. This creates an environment of profound psychological safety, a rare sanctuary where people know they will not be discarded when they inevitably stumble. It is a revolutionary defiance of our throwaway culture, proving that the deepest human bonds are forged in the fires of forgiveness. We must reclaim this fierce, stubborn loyalty if we are ever going to cure the modern epidemic of loneliness. Think right now of a friend you have quietly pushed away, ghosted, or canceled over a minor offense or a painful misunderstanding. Think of the relationship you allowed to wither simply because the conflict felt entirely too messy or inconvenient to resolve. I challenge you to pick up your phone today and send a text of reconciliation, asking to grab coffee and clear the air. Step into the discomfort, offer the grace you desperately need yourself, and pay the messy cost of sacrificial friendship. We have journeyed through the heartbreaking reality of our modern isolation, uncovering the vibrant blueprint of the early church and confronting the agonizing cost of true vulnerability. We know we are lonely, we know what the ancient standard of radical community looks like, and we know that real friendship demands blood, sweat, and radical forgiveness. But theology and theory are entirely useless if they do not change how you live on a random Tuesday in the 21st century. How do we actually forge this first-century community in a world governed by digital calendars, endless commutes, and exhausting side hustles? It is time to bridge the gap between ancient ideals and our hyper-accelerated modern reality. The single greatest barrier to building deep community today is not a lack of desire, but the universal, suffocating excuse of busyness. We convince ourselves that we simply do not have the margin to cultivate profound friendships because our schedules are already stretched to the breaking point. We wait for a magically free weekend or a perfectly clear evening to plan a grand, cinematic gathering that inevitably gets postponed. But the early Christian church did not have more free time than we do. They simply integrated their relationships into their basic survival. To replicate their success, we must fundamentally redefine where and how friendship actually happens in our daily routines. Enter the concept of errand friendships, a radical rejection of the idea that socializing must be a standalone, scheduled event. Stop waiting for the perfect 2-hour window to grab overpriced lattes and start inviting people into the mundane, unglamorous chores of your week. Ask a friend to ride shotgun while you go grocery shopping, or invite them over to sit on your floor and fold a mountain of laundry together. Go to the gym at the same time, meal prep side by side on a Sunday afternoon, or run your kids to soccer practice in the same car. By stacking your relationships onto the tasks you already have to do, you instantly eliminate the excuse of not having enough time. This shift from event-based socializing to shared life rhythms is exactly how true, enduring intimacy is organically built. The deepest conversations rarely happen staring across a formal dinner table. They happen staring through a windshield while stuck in afternoon traffic. When you share the mundane mechanics of living, you strip away the pressure to perform or entertain your guests. You are simply doing life together, transforming dead, solitary hours into rich soil for covenantal connection. It is the closest modern equivalent to the daily shared existence that defined the early Christian movement. As you begin to weave people into your daily errands, you will quickly confront another toxic modern myth. the belief that you need a massive, sprawling squad of friends to be truly known. Social media has tricked us into equating the quantity of our connections with the quality of our community. We exhaust ourselves trying to maintain shallow ties with 50 different acquaintances, leaving us with zero energy for profound, soul-level intimacy. But even Jesus, the ultimate model of human perfection, did not attempt to maintain deep emotional parity with the multitudes. He poured his life into 12 disciples, and within that group, he cultivated an exclusive inner circle of just 3 men to share his deepest agonizing moments. If the incarnate Son of God accepted the human limitation of needing a small, intimate core, it is utter arrogance for us to attempt anything different. You do not need a massive entourage to cure your loneliness. You need 2 or 3 people who are fiercely committed to your survival and sanctification. Look at your current circles and identify just a few individuals who show the capacity for depth, loyalty, and mutual sacrifice. These are the people you are going to invite into a covenantal friendship, intentionally shifting them from casual acquaintances to chosen family. Do not overwhelm yourself trying to save everyone. Focus your limited relational bandwidth on going unimaginably deep with a select few. Once you have identified these 2 or 3 individuals, you must establish a recurring, non-negotiable weekly touchpoint to anchor the relationship. This cannot be a vague promise to catch up soon when your schedules magically align, because the modern world will ensure they never do. It must be a concrete, immovable fixture in your calendar, treated with the exact same reverence as a career-defining business meeting. Whether it is a Friday morning coffee before work, a Wednesday night dinner, or a Sunday afternoon prayer walk, lock it in and fiercely defend it. Consistency is the invisible glue of community, and these weekly rhythms will become the life rafts that keep you afloat during the chaos of the week. However, stepping into this rhythm requires confronting a deeply ingrained, passive mindset that paralyses so many of us in our isolation. We sit in our lonely apartments, bitterly nursing the thought that no one ever reaches out to us, no one invites us over, and no one checks in. We have become consumers of friendship, waiting for someone else to provide the emotional goods and services we desperately crave. If you want a first-century community, you have to completely abandon this victimhood and become the aggressive initiator of your own rescue. You must become the exact type of friend you are so desperately wishing you had in your own life. Be the one who sends the first text, who risks the awkwardness of a phone call, and who boldly unlocks your front door. Be the one who asks the hard, loving questions that pierce through the superficial small talk and demand genuine vulnerability. Yes, you will face rejection, and yes, your invitations will sometimes be met with flaking or sheer indifference. But the early church did not wait for the Roman Empire to make community comfortable. They forged it through relentless, sacrificial initiation. Your future inner circle is likely sitting in their own homes right now, waiting for someone just like you to be brave enough to make the first move. To find these people, you must physically place yourself in environments where covenantal values are actually prized and practiced. This means committing to a local, physical church body, rather than settling for the sterile convenience of watching pristine sermons online. A podcast pastor cannot visit you in the hospital, bring you a meal when you are grieving, or look you in the eye and call out your blind spots. The Christian faith is inherently incarnational. It requires flesh and blood, shared space, and the messy friction of real human beings rubbing shoulders. Step out from behind your screen, walk through the doors of a local congregation, and plant yourself firmly in the messy, beautiful reality of a physical community. The modern loneliness epidemic is a towering, terrifying Goliath, but it will not be defeated by government programs, new technologies, or cultural shifts. It will be dismantled one living room, one shared meal, and one sacrificial friendship at a time. Choosing this path will cost you your hyperindependence, your carefully curated image, and your absolute control over your schedule. It is an excruciatingly difficult journey, demanding a level of self-denial that runs counter to everything our modern world preaches. But the reward for this sacrifice is a deeply rich, intimately connected life that reflects the very heartbeat of our Creator. You no longer have to be a ghost haunting the crowded subway cars of your own existence. You can step out of the dark, isolated room of your digital life and into the warm, vibrant light of true communion. The blueprint has been laid out before you. tested by fire, and proven by 2,000 years of history. The only question left is whether you have the courage to actually build it. Take the first step today and watch as the walls of your isolation finally begin to crumble. Share this entire series with the 2 or 3 people you want to build this kind of radical, first-century community with. Send it to them and simply say, "I want us to be exactly like this." Let's end the loneliness epidemic together, reclaiming the beautiful, messy art of truly knowing one another. If this journey has challenged you, encouraged you, or shifted your perspective on friendship, please subscribe to the channel. We will continue exploring how to build resilient, deeply rooted lives in a fractured world, and I want you alongside us for the ride.